Namaskar, dosto! Have you ever wondered how I'm so calm about Oshinoko's terrible ending, Jujutsu Kaisen's terrible ending, the terrible ending of Game of Thrones, or even How I Met Your Mother? The answer is very simple. It's because I read Chetan Bhagat books and I have watched this little show called Pushpavalli on Amazon Prime. Now, if you guys don't know, Pushpavalli is a dark comedy series that is on Amazon Prime. And if you ask me, I think it is Baby Reindeer before Baby Reindeer. Now, if you guys don't know what Baby Reindeer is, it is one of the scariest series to ever come out in 2024. That's right, guys. It is very, very creepy to know that you are being stalked nonetheless by a person you actually know is crazy and might be a potential serial killer. So, obviously, Pushpavalli is kind of lighthearted, but also gets the aspects of dark comedy on point, even if its screenplay is a bit weak at some points in the show. Pushpavalli started out as great and had the potential to be iconic, but it fell off so hard in the second season. So, what I'm trying to say is that this video is personally for me, and I kind of want to rant out about how Pushpavalli just disappointed me on an incomprehensible level. So, if you guys have watched this show, let's get started and jump right in. Now, if you guys don't know, Pushpavalli revolves around our titular character, Pushpavalli, played by Sumukhi Suresh, who works as a food inspector, which means she checks if your food is organic or no, or if it's contaminated or no, and she lives with her mother in Bhopal. So Pushpavalli attends this workshop at her office for 3 days and gets smitten with Mr. Tall, Fair, and Handsome Nikhil, who hails from Bangalore. And obviously, this starts out as a meet cute because Pushpavalli just hates Nikhil's guts when she first encounters him because Nikhil looks like someone your boss would like to bang or your co-workers in office would like to befriend. So when Pushpavalli starts talking to Nikhil, she is just like, man, this guy is not so bad. And by the end of 3 days, she realizes that she is completely in love with Nikhil, and these two share a very organic chemistry. So you can see how Nikhil can be way too charming enough to make you think that he might actually be into you, but also it's just him being nice. And so you can't really blame Nikhil here because that's how sweet he is. So obviously, Pushpavalli is just like, okay, Nikhil, I'm going to miss you. And obviously, Nikhil feels a bit uncomfortable with that. So he is just like, okay, sure. And Nikhil kind of leaves for Bangalore. And Kavya Bector here, Pushpavalli's friend, is just like, bro, are you sure that you're not smitten with Nikhil? So Pushpavalli tells Kavya Bector that, no, I am not in love with Nikhil. I am practically moving to Bangalore because I want to pursue higher studies, even though she has called her best friend Pankaj, who owns a daycare in Bangalore, right next to Nikhil's office. So Pushpavalli tells her mother that she is pursuing higher studies in food technology, and then she packs her bags and goes to Bangalore. So Pankaj is just like, bro, it's so weird that you want this job. But Pushpavalli is just like, come on, you've been my best friend since we were kids. So please help me get this. And Pushpavalli is kind of good with kids. So Pankaj is played by Naveen Richard. And obviously, it's nice to see all my favorite stand-up comedians in this show. Like you've got Kenny Sebastian, you've got Rahul Subramanian, you've got Kumar Varun, you've got Uruj Ashfaq, you've got Sumaira Sheikh, and not to mention Kavya Bector right here. So seeing all these people just have a blast in this show is so much fun to see and makes for one of the funniest moments in this show. Now, Pushpavalli goes to Vasu PG, and I think Vasu was just your stereotypical Kannadiga, but I'll let it pass since Pushpavalli gets the authenticity of Bangalore right, and the show's humor is just that good. So, Vasu is just like, okay, Pashupali, so you need to pay up this really high amount every month, and punctuality is the key. And Pushpavalli meets her PG mates, Sumaira Sheikh, Uruj Ashfaq, and Pearl. Now, Pearl was also seen in Call Me Bay, where she had to deal with a very unstable Ananya Pandey, and she is also here dealing with a very unstable Pushpavalli. So obviously, I feel really bad for Pearl. My girl is suffering as much as Guts. So Pearl is just like, bro, Pushpavalli, stop talking about Nikhil for 1 second. There are more important things in the world. And she just hates Pushpavalli's guts. Now, Pushpavalli is just like, okay, Loki, I am obsessed with Nikhil. So she kind of pays this chaiwala named T-Boy. And ironic thing is, we never find out what T-Boy's name is in the show. And it also makes me question T Boy's intentions, because why is T Boy even continuing to run his tea stall when he is getting big bucks from Pushpavalli to actually spy on Nikhil and update her about Nikhil's office timings? But okay, T Boy, you do you. You are one of the best characters in this show. Now, T-Boy tells Pushpavalli that Nikhil sir is getting out at so and so time. And this makes for a failed encounter with Pushpavalli ending up in someone's helmet. So it is pretty funny to watch, and that got me hooked to the show. Now, Pushpavalli accidentally bumps into Nikhil another time. And she is just like, oh my god, Nikhil, I totally forgot that you were in Bangalore. I'm so sorry I didn't meet you. And Nikhil is just like, okay, yeah, sure. And they kind of become friends again. And then we find out that Pankaj is just like, okay, Pushpavalli, you've been skipping work. What exactly are you up to? And he is just like, bro, Pushpavalli is my friend. Sure, but she is kind of like an appendix, which means she is kind of not needed to me, but she is also not that annoying that I really want to take her out of my life. And I like the banter shared between Sumukhi Suresh and Naveen Richard here, since I've seen their sketch comedy show, and I really like the banter they portray in Pushpavalli, because I never thought that Naveen Richard could actually play Pankaj and be serious with it, because Pankaj hardly cracks any jokes in this show, but the way he just delivers lines is funny, and it also makes you relate to him on a deeper level. And I just wonder if Naveen Richards ever got hypertension by playing Pankaj, but hey, it's just a speculation. I just enjoy watching Pankaj on screen, just screaming at Pushpavalli for being late to work, and Pushpavalli just being like, okay, I'm sorry, I just need to cook up an excuse to meet up with Nikhil again. So basically, Pankaj is just like, okay, um, Pushpavalli, your mom's been worried sick about you not visiting Guruji. Now, Guruji is played by Kumar Varun, and Guruji's aide is played by Rahul Subramanian, and these two are the funniest characters in the show. And it is because of these two that I was able to get through the second season of Pushpavalli. So Swati is the mother of this kid who attends Pankaj's daycare, and she is Nikhil's best friend. She and Nikhil have been with each other through thick and thin, and she and Pankaj eventually get into a romantic relationship, which is one of my favorite parts of the show. Now, Pushpavalli is just like, okay, I need to take this to the next level, and kind of orchestrates an unofficial date with Nikhil. So, obviously, her friends decide to help her. So, they kind of talk Kenny Sebastian into having a threesome if he manages to include Pushpavalli in his crowd work. Now, Kenny Sebastian is just like, okay, so include Pushpavalli in crowd work. And obviously, if you are not Abhishek Kumar or Nirmal Pillai, crowd work can get very dicey for you. And that's what happens with Kenny Sebastian. So Kenny Sebastian is just like, okay, so Nikhil and this other girl sitting beside Nikhil, who is obviously a stranger, are you both a couple? And obviously, this does not sit well with Pushpavalli, but Kenny is just doing what Pushpavalli's friends instructed him to do, humiliate Pushpavalli. So obviously Pushpavalli is just like, no, no, you're supposed to target me and Nikhil. And obviously Kenny humiliates Pushpavalli really badly. And it's nice to see Kenny Sebastian doing something different, because I was kind of getting tired with Kenny Sebastian's soft humor. So obviously I didn't expect him to be this good with crowd work and insulting his audience. So Nikhil is just like, fine, Pushpavalli, since you told me that it's your birthday and you didn't have anybody to spend your day with, and you made me cancel my rain check, I cannot have you be humiliated on your birthday. So obviously he takes her out and then makes her feel better and everything. So Nikhil leaves, but Pankaj is just like, bro, who was that guy? And Pushpavalli is just like, you know what, Nikhil has been stalking me. And then Pankaj is just like, bro, you should just inform the police about it. And Pushpavalli is just like, no, no, I got it handled. So obviously, this makes things more complicated. And then Pushpavalli shows up at the daycare the next day, and Swati is just like, Pushpavalli, happy birthday! And then Pushpavalli is just like, bro, how did you know? And then Swati is just like, yeah, Nikhil told me, we've been tight since childhood. And Pushpavalli is obviously seething with jealousy, but she is just like, okay, cool. You and Nikhil are best of friends. And Nikhil kind of helps with Arhan because Arhan kind of broke his leg and got a fracture and everything. So he kind of drops and picks up Arhan and then drops by to see Pushpavalli once in a while. And obviously, Nikhil is just not okay with Pankaj being there. These two have a relationship like a Kyo and Yuki. At least it's a toned down version of whoever. So obviously, Pushpavalli kind of visits Guruji upon her mother's request, and then she sees Nikhil there with his mother. So obviously, Nikhil's mother doesn't like Pushpavalli because Pushpavalli's dad is dead. So obviously, being the typical Indian mother, Nikhil's mom is just like, bro, you can't be a very good person or a typical Indian bahu if your dad is not there, which is really weird to me. But hey, for the sake of this show, I'll just roll with it. So Pushpavalli is just like, it's fine, auntie. I'm just madly smitten with your son. So I'll win your heart if that's what it takes. And then she is pretty nice to Nikhil's mom. And then she goes to meet Guruji. And Guruji is just like, bro, stop pursuing Nikhil indirectly because it's not going to work out for you. And Pushpavalli is just like, whatever, this is my show. I'll do whatever I want. And then Pushpavalli goes to Vasu PG and she is just like, okay, I need a new plan. I need to be the attention seeker this time. So she gets a baseball bat or a cricket bat, God knows. And she just asks one of the girls to break her leg with it, which is crazy, by the way. So Sumaira Sheikh and Uroja Shfaq try, and Pearl also tries, but then they only manage to get a bruise on Pushpavalli's leg. And then Vasu is just like, okay, let me try. And then she manages to get a bigger bruise on Pushpavalli's leg. But Pushpavalli is just like, fine, this will do. It kind of hurts. And then she calls Nikhil. And Nikhil is just like, okay, you are behaving very needy. And then he kind of drops Pushpavalli. And then Pushpavalli is just like, hey, why aren't you acting like how I expected? You're supposed to be caring for me. You did the same thing with Arhan. And Nikhil is just like, okay, Pushpavalli, Arhan is 8 years old. And I think you can take care of yourself being the adult here. And Nikhil, my guy, it's not right because we functioning adults can barely take care of ourselves. So it's nice if you look at us like kids. And Nikhil is just like, okay, so I think your friends are kind of here, so they'll take care of you and whatever, so let me leave in peace. And Pushpavalli is just like, okay, we need a new plan. So she kind of finds out where Nikhil lives with the help of T-Boy. Again, why is T-Boy running a tea stall if he already gets big bucks from Pushpavalli? So T-Boy helps Pushpavalli to get to Nikhil's house, and Nikhil is obviously not home that time. And so Pushpavalli kind of tries to make friends with Nikhil's parents, and Nikhil's mother is just like, okay, Nikhil, when are you getting home? Your friend is being creepy right here. And Pushpavalli is just sitting there and there is like awkward silence, and then Nikhil is just like, okay, Pushpavalli, this is like really, really creepy. And then we find out that Nikhil has this dog named Dukey. So Pushpavalli is just like, okay, new attention-seeking plan. Let's steal Nikhil's dog, Dukey. Oh my god. Okay. Diabolical. Like, stealing someone's dog is where I draw the line. Okay. And then finally, she drops Dukey at this PG. Okay. And begs the girls to keep it a secret. And Pearl is just like, bro, how are you putting up with this? And these people are just like, cause comedy, baby. And then later, Pushpavalli obviously brings Dukey out for a walk and everything. And then Nikhil is just worried sick about not finding Dukey anywhere. So he enlists the help of Pushpavalli. And then Pankaj is also just like, okay, fine, we'll also help you find Dukey or whatever. And Pushpavalli kind of finds out that Dookie has diabetes. Wow, Nikhil, you spoiled your dog big time, huh? And then Pushpavalli tries to get biscuits or whatever, so she kind of drops Dookie in Pankaj's crutch, and then by the time she gets biscuits, Dookie kind of ran off, so she has to fight tooth and nail to search for Dookie, and then she finally finds Dookie, and then she sees that here is your dog. And then Nikhil is just like, thank you, Pushpavalli, and everything. And then later, Nikhil and Pushpavalli kind of are on good terms or whatever. But Pankaj is just like, bro, something is really, really not right with this. And he kind of confronts Pushpavalli about it. He is just like, listen, how did you know that Dookie was going to be there? And why did you ask me to keep quiet about this? And Pushpavalli is just like, bro, stop questioning me. And Nikhil is just like, bro, you've been lying to me the whole time about Nikhil being your stalker, about all of this. And look at this web of lies you've spun. And look at this comedy of errors that you find yourself in. And this has become a really complicated situation where, like, stealing that guy's dog. I mean, come on, are you serious? And everything. And this is why you have been a slacker at work or whatever. And Pushpavalli is just like, okay, Pankaj, like, kind of calm down a bit. And then Pankaj is just like, do you realize how crazy you are all because of this guy who you only have known for 3 days at this workshop? And Pushpavalli is just like, yeah, but I feel that way about him and everything. And then she just asks Pankaj to leave her alone. But then later, we see that Nikhil and Swati also find out about it, and then they confront Pushpavalli, and Pushpavalli is obviously left in tears because she kind of has to face the consequences with Nikhil kind of hating her and Swati kind of thinking that she's an insane person. And obviously she is just like, bro, you know, this is not comedy, and this is kind of like what people face in real life. And I love how they did not add a comedic tone to it, and like how everybody was not happy with it, and how it just treats the matter with the utmost sensitivity that it required. So obviously Pushpavalli is just like, fine. She gets money from Pankaj, and then she moves back to Bhopal, and she just stares at the camera before leaving, saying that no, the madness does not end here. I'm coming after this. And I really love that look because it promises us that Pushpavalli is going to stop at nothing to get Nick and to fulfill her obsession with Nick. So, season 1 of Pushpavalli gets an 8.5 out of 10. I really love how it balances the dark elements and the comedic elements together. And I love the performances of this show. I think the cast did a very good job in making every character feel very realistic and making you get attached to every character. So, the world building of Pushpavalli was on point, and Sumukhi Suresh was the standout performer in Pushpavalli. And that's saying something because I'm not a big fan of Sumukhi Suresh's comedy. I think it was cringe for the most part, and it is too outdated and relies mostly on body shaming jokes. So, Pushpavalli coming out was a really big surprise to me because I expected this show to be as bad as Comic Stan season 2, if not worse. And finding out that Pushpavalli actually has layers and is a show with very good writing just makes me really happy and made me root for Sumukhi Suresh. Now, please note that this is the past tense. Made me root for Sumukhi Suresh. I don't root for her anymore. And also, it shows us how stalking can be like really, really creepy. And while Baby Reindeer provides us the point of view of the guy who was getting stalked, Pushpavalli provides us the stalker's point of view. And obviously, it's very refreshing to see that, and it's obviously very relatable. So, I would have done the same thing as Pushpavalli if it was kind of legal. And then we get season 2 of Pushpavalli, which starts out great, but season 2 of Pushpavalli goes so bad, so fast that you won't even know how you got here. Now, Pushpavalli season 2 starts off with Pushpavalli getting engaged to this guy named Vidyut. Now, whatever happens to Vidyut should not happen to any other guy. Like, my guy has been done so dirty, and Vidyut did not deserve that at all. So, justice for Vidyut, okay? And Pushpavalli's mother fought tooth and nail to get this match for Pushpavalli, and Vidyut is like a genuinely nice guy. Like, he's got a good job, he's an NRI and everything, and he also likes Pushpavalli so much. He loves Pushpavalli for who she is and just thinks that she's a pretty good person. Oh boy. So anyway, Pushpavalli is just like, fine, let us bribe Guruji to come here. And honestly, Guruji is like the best part of Pushpavalli season 2. So Guruji is just like, bro, again with this thing, you should not pursue Nikhil, okay? But Pushpavalli is just like, again, the show must go on. So obviously, Nikhil's mother had to visit Guruji, and Guruji is just like, okay, Nikhil, just be careful this season. And then Nikhil sees Pushpavalli getting engaged, and then Nikhil is just like, wow, okay, Pushpavalli got over me. And later, he just goes back to Bangalore after exchanging pleasantries and whatever. But turns out, Pushpavalli actually wanted Nikhil to see all of this, and she just wants to get Nikhil's attention. Then later, Pushpavalli goes to Bangalore with Vidyut, but she continues to stay in Vasu's PG. However, she was kicked out of Vasu's PG for bringing a dog inside, and also Vasu is just like, bro, no pets were allowed in this, so I cannot allow you to stay here. But Pushpavalli is just like, listen, I'm really sorry for that. And then she pays Vasu more, and Vasu is just like, okay, Pushpavalli, since I kind of tried to break your leg with the baseball bat, you can stay here. But then there are shenanigans involving a snake, so Vasu is just like, no, you can never ever stay here. And Pushpavalli has to sneak her way into the Paso PG, and then her friends Sumaira Sheikh and Uruj Ashfaq kind of help her a bit. Very good friends, okay? And then even Pearl is just like, bro, I am so done with this. And Pushpavalli kind of eats a little butter for becoming thin or whatever, which is very weird to me because it looks like there is a rat in the PG, and obviously Pushpavalli is just like trying to sleep and everything, and she cannot even find a good bed, and she kind of lives in the closet all the time. And Vidyut is just like, bro, why are you doing this to yourself? And more importantly, why are you working in a creche? And Nikhil is just like, okay, so you and your fiance are doing good, right? Nothing to worry about, right? And Pushpavalli is just like, nothing to worry about. And Pankaj is also just like, bro, are you serious? There is nothing to worry about. And Pushpavalli is just like, there is nothing to worry about. Me and Vidyut are going very, very strong, and I really want this job. And Pankaj is just like, fine, man, you get the job. And then later, Vidyut has this very stereotypical South Indian aunt, which I think Pushpavalli and her team got on point. Like, I could relate so much with Auntie. So, honestly, Vidya tries everything to get Pushpavalli to be with him, but Pushpavalli kind of ghosts him. Like, there is this one time Vidyut actually planned a dinner date with Pushpavalli, okay? And then he is just like, fine, let's just go out for a bit. And Pushpavalli tries to do that, but then she gets a call from Nikhil regarding problems in his office or whatever. And then she decides to ditch Vidyut to go help Nikhil out. And Vidyut has been done so dirty, and she doesn't even pay for the auto ride, leaving Vidyut to pay for the auto ride. Like, how sad, man. And then later, Vidyut is just like, okay, Pushpavalli, so gets the tennis player and everything. And these two kind of have a banter with the tennis player guessing game. And obviously, it feels like things are going somewhere. But then Pushpavalli later looks at Vidyut being like, okay, so I did not consent to you actually touching me very casually. And then Vidyut is just like, oh, okay. And then when Pushpavalli actually cut her hand with the knife and the apple, and Vidyut tries to tend to it, Pushpavalli is kind of very uncomfortable with it. And then later, Vidyut's aunt just finds all of this very, very suspicious, even though Vidyut's parents are just cool with all of this. And they don't even suspect a thing about Pushpavalli. Now, Paswale looks at Nikhil and she is just like, let's go full throttle on this. So she hires T-Boy, who is back again, and I think he just ran out of the big bucks Paswale paid him, so she has to pay him again. And never in a million years would T-Boy have guessed that Nikhil's crushy is Pushpavalli. So obviously he just keeps asking पुष्पावली कि मैडम ये आपका जायदाद हड़प के ले गया उसको क्या दुश्मनी है आपसे ये वो and whatever the hell, which makes for a really funny bit in the first season, but obviously the joke ran its course in the second season. So Pushpavalli is obviously like, okay, now Nikhil's mother is kind of not well, so let's go visit her again. And obviously she meets a doctor named Ramisa who kind of treats Nikhil's mother, and obviously Pushpavalli kind of pretends to help in that, which again is a plot hole because patients or their visitors cannot do that. And then later she purposefully loses her engagement ring into Nikhil's mother's leg cast. Like, ew, okay? And then Pushpavalli has to like work through finding it, and fortunately, Nikhil's mother is just asleep on anesthesia or whatever. So that's why she just kind of digs it out with Nikhil's help. And obviously, she tries to paint that moment as romantic, which again is gross. And then Nikhil is just like, thanks for helping out with my mom and everything. And obviously, they get closer. And then later, Nikhil has this problem in the office, and then Pushpavalli is just like, okay, you know what, I will help out with that. But turns out that she hired a T-Boy to actually put rats in the water supply, and Pushpavalli kind of catches it, painting herself to be the hero, and Nikhil is just like, wow, okay. And then seeing Pushpavalli run all these errands, Pankaj asks Nikhil if he ever feels bad for her and if he ever feels like he is using Pushpavalli or whatever. And Nikhil is just like, oh my god, yeah, I never thought of that. Despite our differences, I think you are right. And here we see Nikhil and Swati kind of getting closer, and they also share a kiss, which is very wholesome to watch. So obviously, Nikhil is kind of very happy for them, and Nikhil and Pankaj are on friendlier terms. Pushpavalli is at this office with Nikhil, right? So she is just like, come on, just ignore what Pankaj says and everything. We see Pankaj being like, okay, so what exactly is going on between you and Vidyut? And Pushpavalli makes up a lie saying that Vidyut wanted her to get a bariatric surgery because he wants her to lose weight. And obviously, she has been eating butter all this time, which obviously is not a good dieting advice, or you shouldn't try this at home. And obviously, Pushpavalli is just like, yeah, so this is the truth, okay? And Swati is just like, oh my god, okay. First off, you asking Pankaj for 50,000 is diabolical, and on top of that, you drop this. So it's fine and everything. We'll just talk to Vidyut's parents about it and whatever. And Pushpavalli is like, no, I need the money for the surgery and whatever, okay? And then finally, Pankaj is just like, you know what, we'll just settle this in a very friendly way. So he goes to talk to Vidyut's parents. And meanwhile, Nikhil approaches Pushpavalli in this office site, and he is just like, listen, Pushpavalli, you should have just told me that you were into me. And Pushpavalli is just like, yeah, but have you seen me? And obviously, Nikhil and I echo each other's thoughts. So we are just like, bro, Pushpavalli, Sumukhi Suresh, what era are you living in? Ignore the body shamers. They are cheap people. Okay. And Pushpavalli is just like, okay, fine. So obviously she is kind of smitten by Nikhil more, and she feels her friendship or situationship rekindling. But T-Boy is just like, bro, why are you talking to Nikhil in such a sweet tone? And then he sends her a video of Nikhil kissing Ramisa. So she is obviously like, okay, this does not sit well with me. So she gets really angry at Nikhil, and obviously Nikhil is just like, what's with the sudden change in the attitude? And then he just tells Pushpavalli, like, listen, be yourself, you know, you are just too beautiful and everything. And Pushpavalli is just like, oh, okay, now I'm listening. And then he is just like, listen, your fiance should love you for who you are. So if Vidyut doesn't love you, then he might not be the right one for you. And since Swati told me that Vidyut wanted you to get, and Pushpavalli is just like, bro, what? You're telling this to me because of Swati and because of the lie I made up. What the hell? And then later, Pushpavalli is just like, fine, enough is enough. So this time, Nikhil should be dependent on me. So she plants a bomb in Nikhil's office. I'm not kidding. And she is just like, now Nikhil's life's work will be destroyed. So she just leaves. And then Pankaj, meanwhile, is just like, okay, Vidyut's parents. So I hear that Vidyut wants something from Pushpavalli and they are having issues. So obviously, when Vidyut's parents are just like, okay, but do you love her or anything? And Vidyut's aunt is just like, yeah, you coming here instead of her means that you love her. And obviously, Pankaj is just like, listen, it would make Vidyut look bad if I actually mention the plastic surgery thing to his parents. So he just says that, yeah, I love Pushpavalli. And obviously, that does not sit well with Vidyut. So Vidyut goes into the daycare and wreaks havoc. And thankfully, no kids are in there. And obviously, Vidyut is such a nice guy, so he would never hurt any of the kids, right? So obviously, Swati calls Pankaj and she is just like, bro, shit is going down here. And Pankaj is just like, okay, let's call Pushpavalli. And he realizes that Pushpavalli is actually with Nikhil. And he is just like, bro, Pushpavalli, you've done it again. You said it wouldn't be a problem. And then later, Pushpavalli goes to Vidyut. And she is just like, bro, stop it. And Pushpavalli is just like, listen, Pankaj told me that he loves you. And Pushpavalli is just like, wait, that's not true. Okay. And then Vidyut is just like, oh, thank God, because I love you, Pushpavalli. And I think that you are the most beautiful woman in the world and you are the one for me. I love you for who you are. And obviously, Pushpavalli should be melting with this and she should realize that, okay, fine, even if this thing with Nikhil doesn't work out, at least Vidyut would support me, so I should give him a chance. But no, guys, this gets dark because Pushpavalli is just like, fine, Vidyut, I'll tell you about Nikhil. And obviously, Vidyut is just so heartbroken. Oh my god. My guy has gone through the worst rejection in history, and I think he just deserves happiness and someone who loves him, okay? Because Vidyut just deserves justice at this point, and he has been wronged big time. And obviously, he just leaves Pushpavalli alone and walks away in tears. And obviously, I was about to cry in this scene because I could not even imagine how hurt Vidyut was after this. And obviously, Pankaj and Swati are just shell shocked. And they are just like, okay, Pushpavalli, you are mentally unstable. And then Pushpavalli gets a call from Vasu PG because apparently her friends kind of outed her to Vasu by saying that, okay, Pushpavalli is kind of living here illegally, so all her stuff gets thrown out, and now Pushpavalli has nowhere to go. And so she is just like, okay, showtime, baby. So she goes back to Nikhil's office where she planted a bomb. And then Pankaj is just like, okay, Pushpavalli, since I'm scared because you're mentally stable, where the hell are you? Because I'm in the office. And Pushpavalli is just like, bro, wait, what? The bomb is about to explode. You shouldn't be in the office. And then she kind of makes her way to the office, but then the bomb already explodes. And literally, there is a body next to Pushpavalli, but it's not shown whose body it is. And the show ends there. I'm not kidding with you. Pushpavalli ends on a cliffhanger. And why this disappoints me is because we are not getting another season of Pushpavalli. What? Okay? And it's not like this show was not having a budget issue or whatever, okay? Sumukhi Suresh could do that, but she just chose not to, and this is what pisses me off so much, okay? And even Sumaira Sheikh admitted that, hey, we have an ending planned for Pushpavalli and where the story goes from there, but we just choose not to tell you. Bitch, why? Like the best thing you have done in your entire career, and you just chose to end it like this. How do you manage your food inspector duty, Sumukhi Suresh? I really want to know. And it's not like Sumukhi Suresh has done anything groundbreaking after this, okay? She just went on this stupid dating show and then just did nothing, okay? Because Pushpavalli Season 2 gets a 4.5 out of 10 only because of Guruji and only because of how good Vidyut was to her. Otherwise, this show was a train wreck. Okay, like Season 1 was good, but Season 2 was literally a slop fest, and I just wanted closure for this story, but unfortunately, we are not getting it because these people decided to be bitches about it and not even reveal the ending or where the story was going to go or how it was going to end for the characters. And so Suresh is just like, maybe I'll plan a spin off, Vasu PG, and whatever to see where these girls are going to go. And obviously, I would have signed up for it, but obviously, it's not in the works. And like, what is wrong with you, woman? At least shoot some low budget thing on YouTube just to provide closure. Like, why would you do that? Okay, that's like the ultimate betrayal for the fans of the show. And honestly, it's the ultimate form of disrespect. We are just left with emptiness. And it's not even like the manhwa's authors do the same thing. Like, they at least reveal the hints of the ending. But you didn't even choose to do that, even though you had a choice. So, like, really hate Sumukhi Suresh for doing this. But Pushpavalli is kind of an iconic dark comedy in its own way and is always going to go down as this dark comedy that didn't live up to its potential. So, if you have made it till here, then I cannot thank you enough. You've got nerves of steel and you can achieve anything in life. Thank you so much for making it till here. I'll see you next time. And do let me know your opinions on this show in the comments below.